are you loving those stuff? Today I'm going to be doing my July wrap up. So I have my iPad here. I have all the books that I've read. Basically what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be doing my videos by genre. So if you look in the description box, I'll have when I talk about what genre, and then I'll tell you like what minute, so you can just get to that minute, because I feel like that'll be easier. If you like this format, let me know. If you want me to just go back to the format where I just talk about the books in order that I read them, I can do that. And I can also do in order of star rating, so like I'll start with like 1 star and then end up with 5 star. But personally I like genre right now just because it's easier for me to split up like what I've read. So I think I read 20 books this month. I'm pretty sure I read 20 books this month, and I'm actually very proud of myself because last month I read 12, and I'm happy that I read 20 books. The first books I have are YA fantasy, and the first one I'm going to talk about is Binti. I only read the first novel in Binti, and it's basically about this girl, and she is the only one of her people who are invited to work on this ship, and that's basically what I got from it. It's really short, and I enjoyed it. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. It wasn't like amazing and like the best thing I ever read, but also what wasn't terrible. It was like really fast. It was 2 hours on my audiobook, so basically an hour on 2x speed, and it was good. But it wasn't like, oh my gosh, like this is mind-blowing, this is amazing. But this is only the first one out of 3, so I mean I'm still gonna finish the other 2, but I just gave the first one 3 stars. So the next book I have is A Song Below Water, and I gave this book 3 out of 5 stars. This is like the lower spectrum of 3 out of 5 stars, like nearly 2. So basically this book is about black mermaids, but going into this book is really not like, the mermaids isn't really that focused. So if you go into this book thinking you're gonna get black mermaids, that's not what you're gonna get. And I didn't like it because the pacing was just very slow, and I was just bored the entire time. The main character talking about her hair, and her, like the girl talking about her box braids, or the other girl talking about how she went on YouTube to like look up curly hair tutorials and her braid out and like all of that stuff. I enjoyed it. I know some of my friends thought it was really corny, but I enjoyed that part because, you know, hair is like something really big on my channel. I'm always switching my hair up, and I was natural for a very long time in high school, and so I used to watch like braid outs on YouTube. Like I would just sit on the floor and watch braid outs while doing my braid out, and just reading that in a book just made me happy. But I was just bored, and the main characters were like meh, and the story was just meh. Like, you know, it's not the best thing I've ever read, but it's not the worst thing I've ever read either. Like, I still think it was pretty good. So if you want to check it out and that intrigued you, I suggest checking it out. So next I have adult fantasy, and one of the books I have is Middle Game, which I gave 5 out of 5 stars. This is the best book I read this month. And Middle Game is basically just about these 2 twins. When a lot of people talk about this, they basically talk about how these 2 twins are merging and they're supposed to become gods, and yes, that's the plot. But one thing I really enjoyed about the book was, one, they talked about murder. Like, somebody died in the first chapter and then somebody died in the second chapter, like murder. One flaw I did find was that the story was very repetitive. So like, what the point of the story is it's about 2 twins, Roger and Dodger. Roger is the boy, Dodger is the girl. A lot of people, they're like, oh, a lot of people assume they're 2 guys. I did too, but Roger's the boy, Dodger's the girl. And Roger's just like doing his homework one day when like Dodger just talks to him. Like, she's like, yeah, the answer is, and he's like, okay. And then he's like, wait, what the heck, like, why is his voice talking to me? And they're young, so they think of it as imaginary friends, and so they realize that they're real people, but they think they're like in different like alternate universes, because they're supposed to be really smart. So like, Roger is really good at spelling and Dodger is really good at math, and so they think they're just like, when they're younger, they think they're just like imaginary friends, and so they call it a quantum entanglement, which is just them talking telepath. Like, they just talk to each other in their minds, like basically telepath. I think it's a telepath. They're the same thing. Talk to each other via their minds, okay? They call it quantum entanglement. And so one thing that was a flaw for me was the fact that, like, basically something will happen, and then in the book, so in the beginning of the book, the creators were like, they shouldn't meet right now. Like, they're not ready. We don't need them to meet. Like, we don't need to know each other. Like, let's erase their memories of each other. 5 years go by. They meet each other again. Become friends because they think of each other as friends, and they don't really actually know if they're twins. So they think of each other as friends, and then something happens. So then their memories erased. 5 years go by. The same thing happened. But I personally didn't mind. I just liked their relationship with each other. I didn't really care about the characters separately, but I liked the characters together as a brother and sister because they depended on each other. Dodger would be doing math and she couldn't really do it that well, so Roger would be like, the answer is this, this, and this, and like he could see her circling the answer in his mind, and just how dependent they were as siblings. Just I really appreciated that, and I liked reading about them as siblings because they didn't even know they were siblings until like later on in the book. But I just really enjoyed this book. The next adult fantasy I read was City of Brass, and I gave this one 3 out of 5 stars. Sadly, it wasn't like a hit for me. Like, I still have the other 2 books, so I'm still gonna finish it, but it wasn't like, you know, a hit for me. Like, I don't know what the hell that was, but basically this story is about this girl named Nahiri, and she's a scammer. Homegirl is a scammer. She literally tells people their fortune, like fake fortune teller. We love to see it. And she comes across Dara, and they go to find Davidad. I hope I said that right. Well, then the other story is about this character who lives in Davidad, and I give this book 3 out of 5 stars because though I don't really like journey books, this book was still pretty good because you switch from like them on Dara and Nahiri on their journey to Ali, Prince Ali, who's in Davidad, and he's already there, so like you switch back and forth. And I really like Nahiri. Like, she's just such a scammer. Like, homegirl, if you want her to rob someone, she will. Like, there's a scene where Dara was like, okay, well, I'm gonna just steal some horses for tonight, and Nahiri was like, okay, bet, it's done. Whereas I don't know, I didn't really care about Dara because he was just like plain grumpy ass man, and like usually I like that in the character. And then there's Ali, who just didn't have a backbone, and he would just let people treat him any kind of way. So I was just like, it was a 3 out of 5 stars. Like, I didn't find anything absolutely amazing about it, but I didn't hate it. Obviously, I'm going to be continuing the series, and I'm very excited to continue the series because the fan art is so amazing. So the next section I have is romance. The first book for romance is this book called King. This is a dark romance because, y'all, I was fiending for a dark romance. Like, I hadn't read a dark romance, and majority of these books were all audible, by the way. Like, even this one. So I had this on audiobook because I bought a bunch of audible credits, like a bunch. So basically this book is about this guy named King. He ends up like doing something that like puts him in jail. So he goes to jail, and then he comes out, and there's the main character whose name is Doe, Virginia Doe, because she has no memory of her life and nobody knows where she came from. She doesn't know, obviously. And so she is friends with a stripper. I'm pretty sure she was a prostitute, but like she also was like it was weird because it was like she was a prostitute, but she was like the sweet innocent girl that like was so pure and whatever. So he's coming home, you know, he having his little come home party with his motorcycle gang, and she turns up with the party with her prostitute friend. And so they're at this party, whatever, and the friend decides she wants to rob them, and the girl Doe was like, no thank you. She's all like, no, like don't do it. And the girl's like, I'm about to get my money, like you're in or you're out, but either way I'm about to get this money. She literally is out the door, and somebody walks in and catches them like trying to steal the money. So obviously in the man's mind, the girl is trying to steal, like the homegirl who like, no, like don't steal, like she's trying to steal. She should have just got what her friend stole and left. Like literally, let's rob men. That's the goal here. Let's steal from men. The homegirl gets away and she's stuck there, so she has to like stay there because they're kind of like holding her hostage, but she kind of deserved it in their minds because she was robbing them in their mind. She's like held hostage there, and you know, she's forming a romance with the guy who's holding her hostage. It's not called a dark romance for no reason. I pretty much liked it. I think I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars. It wasn't a full 5-star because at the end she ends up like catching him like getting fellatio from another girl, and he doesn't care. Like, you know, in most books where, you know, the girl catches him, he's all like, oh my gosh, like I didn't mean, like this is really what it was. And it turns out to be some like wild stuff that actually did make sense, but from her point of view it didn't. You're like, oh my gosh, like how could you make this make sense? But then from his perspective, you're like, damn, that do make sense though. Nah, from him he was like. And so she ends up running off. Okay, bet then I'm about to get my revenge. I'm about to go be with somebody else. And then he ends up coming back and he's like, I'm just so sorry. And she's like, oh, I'm just so in love with him. Like, I can't ever disrespect him like that. Girl, if you don't disrespect the heck out of him, he disrespected you, disrespected him. What do you think this is? The ending to me was like, but I still enjoyed it. So it was a 4.5 out of 5 stars. Next, we have Party of Two, which was the worst book I read all month. This was a 2 out of 5 star. Part 2 is basically about this girl, and she is a lawyer, and she ends up moving to California because she moves back to California because she lived in New York, but she was born and raised in California. She goes to California, and she's like in this hotel, like this bar or something, and she ends up meeting this guy, and so they have like, they eat cake or whatever, and then it turns out the next day that he is the senator. So she's like, oh my gosh, like he's the senator. So it's like really basic. They end up going out on dates, and you read about them going out on dates. Like he's asking her out. She's like, I don't know if I want to date. Like, I don't know if he wants to date even though he's asking her out. And she was just really, really annoying. I buddy read this with Aza from Frim and Frills. I don't know if she completed the book. I believe she did. I don't really know if she completed the book. Like, it took us forever to read this book. We literally picked it up. We were like, I'm gonna finish it this weekend. 2 weeks later, I was like, you know what? I need to finish this book. I need some books to finish. So I finished it, and I regret it. So the problem with me lies that the book itself was boring. There is a scene where they're on a beach and somebody proposes to this other girl, and then he looks like he's about to propose to her. I don't know how someone looks like they're proposed. I guess because I've never been proposed to, that I don't know what that look looks like. And she's like, no. And I understand why she said no, because you're not about to propose to me after somebody else just got proposed to. Like, the hell? Like, you better come up with something better than that. But in her mind, it wasn't like that for her. She just wasn't ready to get married even though she was 30. She had a law firm. She was doing good at life. She loved him. I mean, you don't really need a reason to not want to marry a man. I feel like him being a man is good enough for her. But at the same time, it was just like she didn't really have a reason to say no. And the thing that actually got me mad was the end. So you know how all romances, this actually started a discourse on Twitter, so hopefully there's no discourse in my comments. But I was talking about this with the hotties, and I was saying how one thing that really irritates me is that romances always do this thing where towards like the end of the book they always have this breakup scene where it's just like really uncalled for, and it's basically miscommunication, and it started this like huge discourse on Twitter, and a lot of authors were like butthurt. A lot of authors who don't write romance were like butthurt, and I'm like, the point. And then the authors who wrote romance were like, yeah, you're absolutely right. But anyways, I digress. So it was like one of those things. That's always my downfall of the book, is the arguments, because the book was like sitting at a 3-star for me, and then it went to a 2-star because of the ending. The next book I read was Guarding Temptation, and I read this because Mina from Mina Reads talked about this in her June wrap up, and this basically is about this girl who ends up sleeping with her brother's best friend. And you know I love brother's best friends, like that is my genre. So she ends up sleeping with her brother's best friend, and he's like, this was a mistake. And she's like, word? A mistake? Alright, never talk to me again. So she ends up never talking to him. It's like a few months, and she ends up getting harassed online because she writes for this article, and she did something in the article, so people were like harassing her, and somebody ended up finding her address, so she had to go live with him. And yeah, it goes on from there. I think I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars and not a full 5, or like a 3.5 out of 5 stars, because the fact that I just wanted more for her to be mad at him for longer. Like, she forgave him a little too quickly for me. Like, he apologized a little too quickly. Like, it wasn't enough angst. It wasn't enough like, I'm mad at you. Like, he apologized. Like, okay, yeah, he was a good man and apologized really quick, but she didn't have to forgive him so soon. Like, we needed a little bit more angst here. Like, the book was short. It's like 100 pages, so it's understandable, but she could have just held out a little bit longer. Like, dang, we need a little bit more. Like, because I was eating the angst up that we were getting. I was like, oh, she's giving him attitude, she's giving him sass, she's giving him back talk. Like, okay, period. And then like 3 chapters later she forgives him, and I'm like, dang, well, that's out the window, that's gone. Then I read You Deserve Each Other. Is a reread for me. This is 3.5 out of 5 stars. This is basically about this couple who are about to get married, and they kind of hate each other. They have this thing where whoever opts out of the wedding first has to pay for it, so none of them want to opt out, so they're trying to get the other person to opt out. And I really loved it because it was like a second chance romance of watching these characters fall in love again, and I don't really like second chance romances, but watching them fall in love again was just so fun. It was funny. Like, my favorite scene in this book is a scene where she cuts her bangs to spite him, and he basically tells her that she has a big forehead. And like, I just thought it was so funny, but it was also so cute. Like, I wanted to cry multiple times because of how cute it was, watching them fall in love again, and like watching them remember how they met. Because at a point in the book she was like, I don't remember how we met actually. And then later on in the book they like are intimate, and he's like, do you remember how we met? And then it like flips to them like remembering how they met, which also was really, really cute. Oh, it's just like watching them fall in love again was just, I loved it so much. So next we have some historical romances, because I did get to historical romances this month. I did a vlog where I only read 3, but I actually ended up reading 6 historical romances. So the first book I have is The Ugly Duchess, which I gave 4 out of 5 stars, and I really enjoyed this book. This is an ugly duckling retelling, and it's basically about this girl who's like ugly and nobody really wants her. Well, a lot of people want her, but they don't want her because of like her beauty. They want her because of her money. And then there's this guy who is like a family friend, and his son is like her close friend. So the guy is a duke, and he has a lot of money, but he spent off his money, so he sends his son to marry her, and they're close friends, which is why the mom lets her get married, because every other guy is always offering her, but mom is always like, no, because you only want this for the money, like you don't really want her. And because they're family friends, like she believes it. And then she wants to marry him. At first it's like to make this other guy jealous, and then you totally forget about the guy throughout the book. And then like she's finding out about it, and then he ends up becoming a pirate, and then he ends up like faking his own death, and then he ends up coming back, and then he has to win her back. And it was just so messy, and it was like so much, and I was like, wow, this I was like here for it, you know. The end, like when they got together again, was like really boring for me, so I was like, man. But the first half of the book was like really good, so I give the book some props. Then we have Scandalous Desire, which was a pirate book, and this is about this girl who is raising this baby that she doesn't even know who it belongs to, because it's not her child, it's not her husband's child. And then she's to find out that the baby belongs to this pirate, and so she goes to like work for the pirate. Well, she goes to like sleep with him one night, because he like orders her to sleep with him, but she doesn't. He just feeds her food, and then she goes home and it makes it look like she slept with him. So then she goes to like live with him, and things ensue for them. I gave it like 3.5 out of 5 stars because I was just bored out of my mind the entire book. And I actually talk about this in my reading historical romance vlog, so you can go see how bored I was. Then I read Lord of Scoundrels, which is basically about this guy who like everyone wants, and everyone wants to be with him, and he's just like, but they know he's a player. And then the main character, who everyone wants to be with her, but she's kind of just like wants to have fun or whatever, and he is like her brother's, the main guy is like her brother's friend, so she has to like be with him. And I thought the book was like okay. Like the book was like a little problematic, because there's a scene where he like kisses her, and then he's like, I know she wanted it, and it's like she never actually said she wanted it. And I know historical romances, like consent is like questionable with some historical romances, but after reading that I was like kind of done with the book. Like they were cute, the relationship, like they had their cute moments, but no. I also read Let It Shine by Alicia, which was the second Alicia book I read this month. I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars. It's basically like the Civil War time, and it's about this girl who's like really involved with like her church and stuff, and she's black. And there's this guy who's like Jewish, and they used to be best friends when they were childhood best friends. And so he ends up coming back into town, and they seeing each other and like being so happy that they seen their childhood best friend, and then they end up like falling in love. But they have to deal with like his parents being Jewish and not liking her black father, and her black father being black and not liking his Jewish family, because they were childhood friends, because her mom worked for him, but her mom ends up like dying from cancer. And it was really short, and it was cute, and the smut was good, so I liked it. Then the last historical romances I have is When a Scot Ties a Knot, and I enjoyed this. This was a 4 out of 5 star. Actually, this is a 5 out of 5 star. When I read it in my historical romance book, this was a 4 out of 5 star, but I realized that this book really raised the bar for all the other historical romances I've read, because a girl has yet to top it. And maybe I just like Scottish romances. Like maybe I want a Scottish boyfriend. This book is about this girl, and she's like writing this letter to this guy, because her aunt wants her to get married. Like her family wants her to get married, so she like makes up this guy in her head, and she like writes this letter to him, and she sends it, and she kind of starts sending him the letters like a coping mechanism. And one day he pops up, and he's like, I'm that man, I'm the guy you're writing to. She's like, you got to be playing, like I made you up. And he's like, no, you thought you made me up, but I'm real. Here's a proposition for you, let's get married. So they get married, and I just thought it was so cute. Like the angst was so good, and there was a jealousy scene, and y'all know I love my jealousy in books. Like a lot of people, they don't like jealousy in books, they don't like jealousy in life, whatever. Maybe I'm toxic, because I think that jealousy is healthy, and maybe it's also my God complex or my narcissism, but I just feel like a guy being jealous over another guy wanting me just reassures that like he really was in love with me. Because if you don't care, why? I'm hot. Why wouldn't you care if somebody was jealous, you know? But yeah, there's like a jealousy scene, and I ate it up because I love my jealousy in books, because I don't experience it in real life, so I get it in my books. And it was good. It was amazing. 5 out of 5 stars. I actually did read another Tessa Dare book. It took me so long to find this book because I have not reorganized my historical romances. But basically, it's Say Yes to the Marquess. I was like, look under here. Just step back. Y'all, I'm a historical romance girl. Like, who would have thought? But this one was a 3 out of 5 stars because it just was not as good as When a Scot Ties a Knot. And maybe that's me comparing When a Scot Ties a Knot. But this one basically is about this girl who's marrying this guy, and then he like ends up going away, so she ends up becoming interested in his brother, and they have like a romance. But I was just bored out of my mind. I read this during a power outage, and I just sat there all night like reading it with my flashlight, and I regretted it. But I finished it by the next morning, so it kept me interesting, but also I was like, damn, I really should have saved my battery for something better. But yeah, because we ended up having a power outage for like 2 days here, so I was bored, as you can see, real life, and I was bored in this book. So then I have literary fiction. So for that, I want to say The Vanishing Half, about a set of twins, and they are both very white passing. They live in this town where like everyone in the town is light skinned. When I first heard about the book, I thought one was dark skinned and one was light skinned, but they're both light skinned, and they live in a town full of light skinned people, and one is kind of like over it and the other one is like complicit to it, and like they're like whatever. So the one who's like over it, like she's up marrying a dark-skinned man, and then the other sister ends up marrying a white man. And it's very interesting seeing how their lives were different as well as their children's lives were different. And I thought that was very interesting. And then there were some other things you learned about the book, like in the book you learn about their father and like what happened to him and like how he suffered from police brutality. And it's like their goal in this town isn't to become white, but it is to become as light as possible, because no matter how white you are, you're still not good enough for white people. Like with the father, he was very, very light, but he ended up being a victim of police brutality. So I thought that the book was really, really good. I don't really have any like favorite characters or anything, but I really enjoyed the book. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. And now on to thrillers. I read Home Before Dark by Riley Sager, and me and Riley Sager don't really have the best friendship. You know, I read Last Time I Lied. I hated it. I gave it 3 stars. That was the first book I've ever read by him. I read Lock Every Door. I didn't hate it, but I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. I didn't read his first book, but I started it. I guessed the plot twist, and I was like, well, I watched somebody's review and I was correct, so there's really no point in me reading it. This one was the highest book I've ever rated him. This was a 4 out of 5 stars, which is ironic because I'm not really a paranormal girl. I like slashers, I like serial killers, like that's my thing. So reading about this haunted house was just like, but I really liked it. Like, it was getting me spooked. The beginning of the book, this book is basically about this girl, and it's kind of like the Haunted Hill House, but the more you read it, it's actually nothing like that. This family moves into this house and they start experiencing like haunted things and like crazy things. So they end up moving out one night frantically, and the husband ends up writing a book about it, and he ends up like, you know, becoming a famous writer. And so she just hates that. Like, she always was known as like the weird girl in school, and she just like the person her dad wrote about in the books isn't the same person as her. So when her dad passes away, he passes on the house to her, and so the book alternates between actual time and then the book that the dad wrote, which I thought was really, really interesting. And the book was really slow well, not slow, but to me the book was like, man, I wasn't getting scared enough, like I wasn't getting spooked enough. And then once it hit, it really took off, and it really just went. And like I said earlier, it's kind of like the Haunting of Hill House, but the more you read it, they're nothing alike. They're not similar in any way, shape, or form. So I really like that. And the ending, I like the ending. There's like 2 plot twists in the end, and I like the first plot twist, and it would have been a 5-star for me, but the last plot twist is what ruined the book for me. So I was just like, damn, you had me and then you lost me. So that's why it's a 4 out of 5 star. When I read thrillers, it's solely based on a plot twist. Like, so if the plot twist isn't good, I don't know what to tell you. Like, the book could be like the best thing ever written to man, but if the plot twist, if I'm not like you know, shook by the plot twist and thinking about it for days, I'm not gonna care. So the last book I have is When No One Is Watching by LaCour, and this is actually the hottest book. This is actually the hotties book pick for October for our book club, the hotties book club, and I'm really excited because I'm gonna reread it when it comes out. I'm gonna buy a copy and I'm gonna reread it, and I'm so excited because I just love this book. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. I always rave about it. This basically was about gentrification, kind of. It's about this black girl who lives in this neighborhood, and she realizes that like people in her neighborhood are like leaving, but it's like, where do these people go when they leave? So there's this other guy named Theo. He's a white guy, and he is also living in the neighborhood because like there are, you know, white people in the neighborhood. They're trying to like gentrify the neighborhood, so there's white people moving, and so he just like doesn't really think anything of it. He just doesn't really think anything of that, like, you know, because he's white, so he doesn't really understand. And they end up crossing paths, and they have to work with each other to figure out what's happening, because a lot of creepy things in this book happen. Like, for me, there's this one part where she's taking an Uber. So she calls for an Uber, and the first person cancels. So she gets this white guy named Drew. So she's going to a hair appointment, and the guy already like, he's like talking about like the riots in the neighborhood because they've been gentrified, and he's a cop, so he doesn't really see the point in it. And like he's like talking to her, and she's like starting to feel uncomfortable, and he takes a turn. When she gets in the car, he locks the door, and she thought that was weird. So then like they're talking or whatever, and he ends up talking about like the riots in the neighborhood and how he's a cop and he just thought it was pointless, and he takes the wrong turn, and she's like, can you let me out? And he's like, he just ignores her. He keeps talking, and then they end up like getting to it, and they like 2 blocks down, and he's like, this is the closest stop. And then he like, and she's trying to call for help, but her phone is frozen. So when he stops and lets her out, she like goes to like report him, but her phone is still stuck on the guy that she had before. And then when her phone re-uploads, like nothing is there, and there's like no evidence that he was ever on the site ever. So I thought that was really scary because I take Ubers a lot. You can usually see like the Ubers are taking a different turn, but it was just the fact like I just thought it was so spooky, and like there would be like crazy things like that happening. And the plot, I kind of guessed one plot twist, but it didn't take away from my enjoyment. I kind of guessed it on purpose. Like, I feel like if you're just reading this book, you won't really think about it. But unless you're like me and you take joy in like figuring out plot twists, like you'll probably figure it out. But I take joy in figuring out plot twists. And then the last plot twist I loved, and I think that makes the book more realistic. Like, everything about this book is so realistic. Like, I live in Michigan. I live near Detroit. Like, my family is in Detroit. Detroit is getting gentrified all the time, and like the thing that attracts people to Detroit is the graffiti. It's downtown, it's the Riverwalk, like it's Belle Isle, which is like a little island that we have, and you can see Canada from it. Like, that's what attracts people. So people try to like gentrify Detroit, and it's like, it's so crazy because the blackness is what attracts people, but they don't really care about that. And so gentrification could happen to me. Like, I live in like a good neighborhood, but it's primarily black. So one day they could be like, they could just tell us all to get out, and they want more white people here, and we would just have to leave. Like, gentrification is real for me. Jordan Peele, like, turning black things into horror is just so interesting for me, and it was good reading a black thriller. And so I just find that interesting because like that, I feel like a lot of the things that happen in this book will go over non-black people heads, and like POC people heads. Like, a lot of like the microaggressions or the aggressions or like the racism or like the small racist things that they say and do. And then once you get to the plot twist at the end, I don't know if a lot of people would like the plot twist at the end, but I enjoyed it because I think that is realistic, and it's something that like actually happened, and it's something that could happen. And I want to talk about it without giving away spoilers, but I guess I'll have to wait till the live show in October, which is why I'm so excited, because we can talk about the spoilers in the end. And yeah, I'm just really excited to read this book again in October and like highlight and annotate. I've never highlighted or annotated a thriller. This is actually the very first thriller I've ever given 5 stars to. Like, even my favorite thriller that I've read, The Woman in the Window, I gave that book 4.5 out of 5 stars. This book was a full on 5 stars, like the first thriller to ever get a 4 out of 5 stars for me. So I loved it, I enjoyed it, and when the book comes out in September, I highly encourage people to buy it because it was just like the best thing ever. And not me raving for this book for like 10 minutes straight. But that's it for this wrap up. I hope that you liked it. I hope you will join me again. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in my next video. No. Wrap up. Already, my unhaul was over there.
Okay, we have time.
Already done. Do you want to come say hi to the audience? What is Tori doing?
Playing this game as usual.
So who's that in the room?
What?
Who's that?
Jada.
Oh, I thought she left. Did she leave and come back?
Yes.
Oh, okay, that makes sense. Hello.
Hey, didn't mean to interrupt. But here I am interrupting.
Your purse is cute.
Thank you. I'm trying to get all this stuff out. Oh, she's a grown woman.
She is.
She's a grown woman.
She said,
she's a business
I'm a
woman.
grown woman, no Beyonce.
That's
Thank you. You never doing the thing.
She's a grown woman.
Period.